Greetings to all our viewers tuning in. If this is your first time with us, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the stories that are reshaping the global balance of power. Ladies and gentlemen, in the vast heart of the South China Sea, where every wave seems to echo with the voices of history, a quiet transformation is unfolding. From satellite images captured in August 2025, faint lights can be seen slowly moving across the open sea. These are not fishing boats, nor are they tourist vessels. They are dredging ships flying the red flag with a yellow star, working tirelessly day and night through wind and waves. Each scoop they take gives rise to new land. Every trench carved beneath the sea marks another line of sovereignty, written not with words but with action. Coral reefs that once barely broke the surface during dry season have now become new sandbars. Layer by layer, sand is piled up. Little by little, small structures appear, like seeds sprouting in the middle of the blue sea, rooted in a greater dream, the dream of a strong Vietnam, capable of protecting every inch of its islands, every reef, every wave that bears its name. In just a few short years, Vietnam has expanded 8 features in the Spratly Islands, places that once had little more than storms and seabirds. Over 930 hectares of new land have been created, a number equivalent to nearly 70% of the total area China reclaimed during its peak dredging campaign from 2013 to 2017, a period often called the height of the dredging war in the South China Sea. And what's stunned the world even more is that Vietnam has done it all in silence. No announcements, no fanfare, no confrontation. A quiet act, yet resolute. Aerial images now reveal an entire new network taking shape. Once isolated reefs are being linked into chains. What were once tiny outposts now feature piers, helipads, hangars, and fortified structures. These aren't just feats of engineering, they are milestones of national will. Because wherever Vietnamese people live, work, and stand guard, that is where sovereignty resides. And here's the strange thing. While the world watches every move Vietnam makes, China, known for reacting harshly to any action by other countries, has remained completely silent. No official objections, no Coast Guard interference, no fighter jet intimidation. The South China Sea, long accustomed to the roars of diplomacy and military tension, has suddenly gone quiet, an eerie, deliberate silence. Why is it that Beijing, a country that once sent warships just to block a single Philippine resupply boat, is now turning a blind eye to Vietnam's growing islands? Is there a deeper strategy hidden beneath this calm? A more calculated, cautious plan China doesn't want to reveal? Or has Vietnam simply discovered a way to build without confrontation, to expand without provoking war? That question is just the beginning of a much larger story, a story of land and water, of geopolitical currents and survival in the open sea. And to understand why Vietnam has chosen this path of quiet yet steadfast island building, we need to dive deeper into the very nature of this game, a game of land and sea, where every meter of sand, every grain of coral, carries vital strategic meaning. To understand why Vietnam has chosen this path of quiet yet unwavering island building, we must return to an unchanging rule of the sea. To exist is to be present. The South China Sea is not just a deep blue expanse in the middle of the ocean. It is a vital artery of the global economy, with over $3.4 trillion worth of goods passing through each year, and home to an estimated 11 billion barrels of oil and more than 5 trillion cubic meters of natural gas. But for Vietnam, its value isn't in the numbers, it's in survival. Because to lose control of even a single reef or coral atoll is to surrender a strategic space bound tightly to security, livelihoods, and national honor. From the shores of Can Hoa looking out toward the Spratlys, the 500-kilometer stretch is not just a geographical distance, it's the boundary between safety and uncertainty. Meanwhile, China can dispatch forces from its built-up bases at Fiery Cross Reef or Subi Reef with just a few dozen kilometers of travel. That disparity makes Vietnam's efforts to patrol, supply, or defend its forces incredibly difficult. Every voyage to the islands requires precise calculation. Each drop of fuel, each day of rations, every unpredictable storm. That's why building support points in the middle of the sea isn't a choice. It's a necessity. Every newly formed island is like a home raised in a vast, water-bound wilderness, a place where Vietnamese soldiers, engineers, and fishermen can stand firm, live, work, and affirm their nation's sovereignty with their own breath and sweat. Since 2021, Vietnam has begun employing large-scale industrial dredging technology, equipment once used exclusively by China. Satellite images show coral areas that once appeared only in the dry season, now transformed into islands with docks, logistics zones, even helicopter pads. At Bark Canada Reef, what used to be thin stretches of sand has grown into an island nearly 3 kilometers wide, large enough to host a 20,400-meter airstrip, a sign of long-term planning rather than spontaneous development. And at features like Tien Nu, Lad, and Tennant Reefs, fortified structures are steadily rising from piers and housing to radar arrays and defensive installations. What's striking is that Vietnam has done all this without the noise of propaganda or chest-thumping slogans. Everything has unfolded quietly, like a steady, silent current. The dredging ships don't broadcast their work, don't provoke encounters, don't send out threatening signals. It seems Hanoi understands deeply that in this game, victory doesn't come from loud declarations, but from careful, deliberate moves. For Vietnam, building islands isn't an act of provocation. It's an act of survival, not to seize, but to secure. Not to boast, but to prove that even from a position of weakness, it is possible to defend oneself, with clarity and persistence. Because in the vast ocean, only those who lay solid foundations for the future can stand strong against any storm. And it is this quiet persistence that is catching the world's attention. While Vietnam expands its presence on an unprecedented scale, China, a country known for forceful reactions to even the smallest moves in the South China Sea, has remained utterly silent. No diplomatic warnings, no military threats, no Coast Guard ships in sight. A strange silence, perplexing, yet calculated. Could it be that, after years of confrontation, Beijing has realized that direct conflict with Vietnam is no longer a wise option? Or is there another strategy, deeper, more patient, lurking beneath these calm waters? The answer, ladies and gentlemen, may lie in that very silence, that invisible force which at times can be more daunting than the roar of cannons. What's baffling international observers right now isn't how fast Vietnam is building its islands. It's the fact that China isn't saying a word. A silence so unusual, it's almost unbelievable. Just a few years ago, when the Philippines erected a single metal pole on Scarborough Shoal, Beijing immediately launched a fleet, scrambled aircraft, and unleashed a flurry of angry diplomatic statements. Yet today, as Vietnam expands hundreds of hectares of artificial islands and waters China has long claimed as its core interests, the response has been eerily quiet. No protest, no threats, no military moves. Has China changed? Or is this merely a temporary strategy, a step back to prepare for a bigger play? That question has the entire region watching Beijing's every move. But if we look closer, we'll see that this silence isn't meaningless. It's a calculated response, designed to avoid escalation while preserving strategic advantage in a time of mounting pressure on multiple fronts. First, China's power is being stretched thin. To the east, it faces Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, regions deepening military ties with the United States. To the south, the Philippines has opened 4 new bases to U.S. forces, deployed long-range radar, and even granted Washington access to its airspace for patrol operations. In this context, confronting Vietnam, a nation with a firm strategic footing and a long history of combat experience, would only open up another front that Beijing may not be ready to handle. Second, Beijing knows well that Vietnam is unlike any other country in the region. Hanoi doesn't provoke, doesn't challenge, but it also never backs down. Vietnam is the only Southeast Asian nation that simultaneously maintains deep trade ties with China, strong military cooperation with Russia, and open defense dialogues with the US, India, and Japan. That diplomatic web acts like a balancing net. Any aggressive move by Beijing risks tipping the scales against it. In that light, silence is not weakness, but a wise choice to avoid awakening an adversary who understands them too well. Third, perhaps deep within China's internal circles, this silence reflects a genuine caution. Beijing has seen that Vietnam is not only capable of defending itself, but of striking back at the right moment in the right way. Since 1979, history has shown again and again that when Vietnam is backed into a corner, it may not make noise, but it never gives in. And perhaps more than anyone, China knows. A provoked Vietnam is the most unpredictable kind. That's why, Instead of warships, Beijing turns to trade. Instead of military pressure, it opts for silence, hoping economic interests will keep Hanoi tethered. But in this very silence, China may not realize it's witnessing a quiet shift. Vietnam is no longer reacting. Hanoi is seizing the opening left by China's restraint to build real capabilities, one island, one port, one defense system at a time. And as these islands take shape, as the red flag with the yellow star flutters over new land rising from the sea, a new order is being written. Not with gunfire, but with strategy, vision, and the quiet determination of a people shaped by war, yet anchored in the strength of peace. Here in the South China Sea, we are witnessing a shift in the balance of power, where Vietnam, China, and the rest of ASEAN are stepping into a new game, one that is more refined, more cautious, and more calculated than ever before. On today's chessboard of the South China Sea, two major players, Vietnam and China, are pursuing entirely different paths, yet both are striving for the same goal: control over one of the planet's most strategically vital spaces. Beijing expands its artificial islands to establish military identification zones, installs radars, anti-air and anti-ship missile systems, creating a massive steel shield over the region. Vietnam, on the other hand, quietly builds up small islands to deepen its defensive depth, strengthen supply lines, and ensure that even in the worst-case scenario, there will always be floating fortresses standing firm in the ocean. One seeks dominance, the other seeks survival. Yet together, they're forcing the region to rethink how power is defined. As Vietnam expands its presence in the Spratlys, the regional balance begins to shift. The Philippines, deepening its military ties with the US, suddenly finds itself in a tough spot. It files lawsuits against China for coral destruction, yet hesitates when it sees Vietnam carrying out land reclamation in its own way. Malaysia and Indonesia remain silent, understanding that Vietnam poses no threat to their fishing grounds or shipping lanes. Meanwhile, Thailand, Singapore, and Brunei watch with a mix of concern and curiosity. Is this the moment Vietnam begins shaping a new equilibrium for all of ASEAN? At the same time, major powers outside the region are adjusting their strategies. Washington sees in Hanoi a potential partner, firm in the face of China, yet fiercely independent. India, Japan, Australia, and South Korea are also strengthening ties with Vietnam through defense and maritime security cooperation. Even Russia, despite being bogged down by sanctions, continues to maintain military technical channels with Hanoi, viewing it as one of the last footholds of Russian influence in Southeast Asia. Together, they form an intricate web in which Vietnam stands both at the center and on its own, a new anchor point in the security architecture of the Asia-Pacific. What's remarkable is that while China strives to project itself as the regional superpower, Vietnam is quietly building strength in a very different way. No bluster, no provocation, just steady progress on facilities capable of receiving Gepard-class warships, Kilo-class submarines, and Su-30 fighter jets. When combined with the BrahMos supersonic missile system, Vietnam's strategic deterrence begins to cover the entire South China Sea. Each island, no matter how small, becomes a critical link in its defensive network, an unsinkable aircraft carrier of the nation. In this emerging balance, Vietnam's role has moved beyond its own borders. Hanoi is not just safeguarding its own sovereignty. It has, perhaps unintentionally, become a natural bulwark for the entire ASEAN region against growing pressure from Beijing. Vietnam's composure, caution, and its three no's principle: no military alliances, no foreign bases, no siding with one power against another, are precisely what earn it international respect and trust. The South China Sea, therefore, is no longer just a collision point of power. It is becoming a measure of strategic intelligence. The one who knows when to advance, when to pause, when to stay silent, and when to act. That is the one who truly controls the game. And at this moment, Vietnam is showing that it understands the rules better than anyone else. Because out there in the vast waves, the strongest weapon is not missiles or warships, but the concrete blocks laid in the right place, at the right time, solid foundations that turn willpower into reality. And that is where we enter a new chapter in the story of the South China Sea, where concrete, sea sand, and human intellect merge into one, forming a strategic weapon called Vietnam. Ladies and gentlemen, in the 21st century, war is no longer defined solely by the sound of gunfire or the smoke of battle. In an age of satellites, radar, and hypersonic missiles, sometimes the most powerful weapon makes no sound at all. It's cement. It's steel. It's the concrete blocks poured deep into the sea, where every meter of land carries a vital strategic meaning. The South China Sea is witnessing such a quiet revolution. What Vietnam is doing is not just building islands. It is turning each structure into a declaration of sovereignty. From barren coral reefs, tiny specks of land have become fortified bases with docks, helicopter pads, solar power systems, surveillance radars, and housing for station forces. These islands aren't built to show off strength. They are built to ensure that the red flag with the yellow star will always fly high above the waves, no matter how fierce the storm. For Vietnam, concrete isn't just a building material. It is a symbol of will. Unlike nations with vast budgets and cutting-edge tech, Vietnam rises from resilience and self-reliance. These outposts in the sea are not the work of massive corporations, but of Vietnamese engineers, workers, and Navy personnel. They labor under burning sun in salt winds and typhoons, pouring each block of concrete like planting seeds of faith into the ocean. Faith that this nation, though small, is strong enough to defend itself. What few notice is that each time a new structure is completed, Viet not only expands physical territory, it also strengthens its legal standing on the international stage. Under maritime law, nations with long-term physical presence gain stronger claims to sovereignty in that area. In other words, every square meter of concrete carries not just military value, but legal weight, a living proof that Vietnam is exercising its sovereignty in a lawful, peaceful, and persistent manner. While China struggles with economic woes, tensions in the Taiwan Strait, and diplomatic rifts with Manila, Vietnam has chosen the perfect moment to cement reality. No noise, no threats, just quiet, steady expansion of strategic positions, as if calmly rearranging the chess pieces of geopolitics, one deliberate move at a time. With every new patch of land comes greater control over maritime space. With every island extended comes a new foothold for Vietnamese vessels to reach farther and stand firmer amid the waves. From the satellite's view, the South China Sea is no longer just a vast stretch of water. It is now a glowing string of pearls, Vietnam's artificial islands, linked together into a soft but enduring defense network. Each island is a link, each structure a statement, and each block of concrete a testament to Vietnamese intellect and resolve. Amid the world's noise, perhaps it is this silence that holds the real power. Because concrete doesn't speak, but it tells a story. The story of a small nation that chose not to confront with force, but to transform the sea into a firm foundation for its future, through wisdom, through work, and through an unshakable love for its homeland. The South China Sea has never been a calm body of water. Every wave carries the echoes of disputes, of strategic calculations, and of unyielding resilience. But amid the raging currents of power and ambition, Vietnam is charting its own course, not through gunfire, not through grand declarations, but through quiet determination and wisdom. It's a war without smoke or flames, yet full of tension, where the winner is not the loudest voice, but the one who endures the longest in silence. Vietnam doesn't build islands to flaunt strength, but to secure its space for survival. It doesn't seek confrontation, but strives to create balance. It doesn't aim to be the center of conflict, but hopes to become a pillar of peace. Beneath the concrete poured into the sea lies the philosophy of a nation shaped by thousands of years of history. When pushed into a corner, the Vietnamese do not retreat, but neither do they strike blindly. They choose to stand firm, with reason and with dignity. China may be silent today, but that silence is not a victory. It's a quiet acknowledgement that Vietnam has found a way to play by the rules, at the right time, using a method no one can openly oppose. Every meter of land reclaimed from the sea doesn't just expand territory, it expands belief. The belief that in this uncertain world, there still exists a nation brave enough to defend its sovereignty without noise, and wise enough to choose peace without losing strength. From afar, those tiny islands in the South China Sea may look like nothing more than green specks scattered across the ocean. But through the eyes of history, they are symbols of Vietnamese will and intellect. They are proof that this nation never gives up, even when facing powers many times greater. Because Vietnam's strength does not lie in size, it lies in perseverance. It doesn't roar with cannon fire, but speaks through the quiet resolve to do what's right, even when standing alone. Someday, when history books are written about the South China Sea, they will not only speak of clashes, confrontations, or threats. They will remember that there was once a small nation that chose to guard the sea with wisdom, not with blood, but with belief. And perhaps that, more than anything, is Vietnam's greatest victory. A triumph through clarity, one that needs no praise, but earns the world's respect. Ladies and gentlemen, the South China Sea remains vast and full of storms, but in every crashing wave, we can still hear the heartbeat of a people long accustomed to tempests, yet never bowed. And if you too believe that wisdom and resolve can be stronger than artillery, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's reflect together on this journey to safeguard the sea and sky of our homeland. And don't forget to subscribe, because every click, every share, every gesture of support is the fuel that keeps us going, bringing you more honest, powerful stories from Vietnam, a small country with the heart of a great nation.